Alright, what's up YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel. We're in the lounge room again, going to be doing some more board game prototyping. Let me set it down here on the table. Like this, I think. Like, look, my tripod is being disagreeable. Fucking hell. How's that? It's a bit low. Is that better? Yeah, there we go. If I could just be in frame. Here we go. Alright, so we've got something printed out. I think this is a better look at it. So I'm making a tile laying game. This is kind of what the tiles look like. It's like a hex grid kind of a thing. And what you're trying to do is build a city, build trade routes from the city to the main city, and score points by delivering goods, basically. So this is kind of like inspired by Against the Storm, which if you've seen my Twitch channel, I've been playing a lot recently. And the basic premise of that game is you drop somewhere in the wilderness and you are trying to build up a settlement. And in the settlement, there's lots of different types of resources, especially depending on whereabouts you are. And you are collecting different things to send back to what's called the smoldering city, I think it is like the big city that you care about, where you came from. And you are trying to develop like resources, things like you can set up farms, you can set up all this kind of stuff and build your base and upgrade it and stuff like that. And so the idea is you are kind of doing something similar to that, but probably stripping. I don't want it to be as ridiculously complicated. I don't like making ridiculously complicated games. The idea is that you would be doing something similar here, except it's got hex tiles. It's a bit more like Catan. We've got your fixed resource types. This is really hard to cut out. I have done a very poor job. Maybe I can like, I'm gonna have to bend it like either way to get a little bit out of there. We go. So it's a bit bent, but so this is what the tiles are going to kind of look like. So we've got mountains, forests, and like a prairie type thing, right? So each of these gives you a different type of resource, and so it's like ores, wood, and then like livestock or pelts or whatever, right? Some kind of creature thing. And the way that you get the resource from it is that you have to have two matched next to each other. So kind of like, imagine like this, right? You've got a bunch of forests here. If you just two forests next to each other, it means that you can clear one of them out and make wood. And then you can use the wood to build roads or caravans. And then you'll have to have placed a certain amount of tiles, because the destination city that you're trying to send stuff to is 6 tiles away. No matter how you place it, like you have to travel 6 tiles to get to it. So that way all the players don't have to be positioned around the same central thing. It's just like you kind of go, okay, this is 6 tiles away, this is where it is. Well, I did that really wonky cut. This is actually very difficult. With the other stuff, you're just like kind of cutting the edges off. With this, I have to like actually cut a fine detail kind of a thing, which is very difficult. I think I'm doing okay. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be playable. So this art on the game comes from an asset pack a lot of video game developers, it's like really common to use something like the Unreal Engine has their own asset store, I think, to buy different 3D or 2D assets to be able to put in your game. And itch.io has tons, and they're really good and they're pretty cheap. And I've bought just like, you'll see like a big bundle go on sale where it's like $20 and you have like fucking hundreds of things in this bundle. Like, it's actually crazy. And they're all like super discounted. And you go, oh, I'll get that. And it's like actually so many useful things. I've used tons of it in Winning Love by Daylight. Like a lot of the little different bits and pieces that I've needed for those games have come from that. A lot of the design competition stuff that I do uses art from that asset pack. Because it's just like, whilst yes, I love working with an artist and paying an artist to do stuff, all of my artists are currently busy doing other stuff. And if I'm just like prototyping something just to test it out, I want it to be really visually obvious what the things are supposed to be. So being able to use asset art or stock art or whatever that will instantly communicate to the player what it's going to look like or what it's supposed to look like is really helpful. I still have so many pages to cover. This is going to take forever. Which is really helpful because you want to have none of the feedback you get from the playtester about how the game looks, because it's a prototype. It's not going to look like this when it's done, obviously. You want them to be able to focus on the gameplay. And so, whilst, yes, this is kind of thematically based on Against the Storm, the board game inspirations are Taluva, which is a game I've only seen on Board Game Arena. I've never seen anyone talk about it in real life, so I don't really know how popular it is. And Settlers of Catan. So Settlers of Catan has the build the base, build the roads kind of a thing. But the resource gathering system is random, and there's no fucking chance I'm putting that in my game. So instead, it's more... and like King Domino. Like, got that kind of King Domino thing where you need to place your tiles around your city and have them overlap in such a way that is advantageous for points. But in this case, instead of it being advantageous for points, it's advantageous for how you gather resources. So I've got a little thing built here with just a couple of tiles I've cut out. So I'm just gonna bring this in. So this is kind of what a section would look like, right? I've messed it up in moving it, but as you come along and clear stuff, you would cut out different pieces. So for example, I have here, this is what a cleared piece would look like. And then we have, oh no, sorry. This is what a cleared piece would look like. This is what a built road would look like. So the road is going to go on the back of cleared pieces, and then what would happen is you clear a location for its resources, then it becomes a cleared piece. You can't mine it again or whatever. But then you can pay resources to flip it over into a road, and while it's a road, the caravans move quicker along the road. Because the idea is you have to get a certain amount of resources to deliver, and caravans can only carry so many. And the caravan moving on the board costs actions, so the fewer actions you can spend moving the caravan on the board is advantageous. So you're trying to spend the resources that you gather efficiently to be able to deliver a large amount, but also deliver a large amount quickly. So I think it's going to be one of those, it's kind of like a management thing, where you're trying to best manage your choices. But a lot of the maths I haven't put together. What I wanted to do first was the visual construction of it. A lot of the times when I am building a prototype for a game, I go, okay, what is really the list of components that I need for this? For example, in one of my last videos that I did, like this was a devlog with the bomb defusal game, I started out with how many cards would be the numbers needed for the safe cracking type diffuse thing. So I'm like, okay, look, I want 4 cards, 4 cards of each number, because if I have a combination of that I'm trying to solve that is 4 numbers long, and it could roll 4 6s, which means I need to have 4 6s in the game to be able to solve that problem. And then I started off with that, and I was like, okay, what about the communication cards and all this other stuff? And that informed how it all came together, because the key idea told me how many components I would need mathematically, and then it grew from there. With this, I was like, okay, each player should have roughly this number of tiles available to them to need to be able to move the 6 spaces. And so that's like assuming that you don't always put them in a line. Like, it's not just one big long line and then that's all you get. You can't place any other tiles. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I've said, okay, approximately 12 tiles per player. And that's the way that it would probably work out. And there's still like a few different other bits and pieces that I have thought about and haven't been able to explore yet. Like, I want to be able to have special tiles that have got buildings on it. So in Against the Storm, when you cut into a glade, which is like an undiscovered region, you can encounter destroyed buildings that you can rebuild to basically have that building, because you have a tech tree and you're unlocking stuff like that. So it might be a building that you don't have access to. And then you go, okay, well, cool. I've got this thing. I can now use this building. And I wanted to do something similar to that, where it's like, okay, this is a ruin of this thing. If you spend this many resources, it's no longer a ruin, and you can now use it to do this thing. Which I thought would be super easy, but in doing that, I have to then be mindful of how it affects the accessibility of resources, because you would need it to be super infrequent. Because what if the person's just waiting for another wood tile because they need wood desperately or whatever? And so that's kind of tough. Sometimes when trying to build something that's big concept, starting with a stripped down version of the game that is just the core gameplay is a really good way to find out what the rest of the game needs. For example, I made a word game which was basically Boggle, kind of Boggle meets Scrabble kind of a thing, where you have a grid of letter dice, and the letter dice are rolled and rearranged by the players to try and make words. And I didn't want to add all of the different ruling and different scoring, all this kind of different stuff that I had in mind for it, because I wanted to add stuff like the double word score, triple word score, those kind of incentives, and grid location, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to hold off because the game might already be too complicated. In the super stripped down version I had, which was literally just you have hand management and you roll your dice and you make words, like that might already be too complicated as a base mechanic. And I was right. I've played the game a few times. It is a prototype I have lying around. I might use the letter dice for other things later, but that game is dropped because it's just too hard. Being able to make words from a finite pool of letters is very difficult already. And not everyone is good at it. And when it's very, very hard, and then you go, okay, I now need you to remember all this other stuff that's happening. I'm like, no. Which is, I don't know, what you'd want to not. I'm really against overcomplicating a game. I already see too many very heavy games getting way more praise than they deserve because it has high customer perceived value, because they're like, oh, it's got all these miniatures, it's got all these components. I'm like, that's great, but I want to enjoy the gameplay every time I play it. And so far, only light games have promised that to me and delivered. Like, Codenames is good every time. I've played Codenames maybe 1,000 times. Not often by choice, but often because the board game meetup I would go to, it was just the game that was most likely able to get a yes from everyone. Especially when you've got a mix of heavy and light gamers, right? And so we ended up just playing it a lot. And that game is good every time. It's not great. I've probably played too much. But comparing that to something that plays as a campaign, where for example, the legacy design model says people aren't going to get to the table, their big board game, more than 10 times. So let's just give them the best 10 games that this game can offer and incentivize them to get to game 10, which is insane. So imagine you make this super complicated game and it gets played once by the person that bought it and then never again. That's semi-disappointing. I'd rather have something like, for me, Stew is my light game that gets pulled out all the time, but I know for a lot of other people, you've got stuff like Love Letter, you've got stuff that's like really easy to pick up and play with like a small group of people. I know Codenames is really, really good at that. And I would just much prefer every game that I make falls into that category every time. Whereas like Murders at Seawoods Manor, the game I am currently working on releasing, is my biggest game to date. And even then, the gameplay is still under an hour. I don't think I'm ever going to make a game that goes for longer than an hour, because fuck that. When someone says to you, how long does the game play for, and your answer is above an hour and a half, they're like, oh, I could be watching a Marvel movie right now. And then you have to compete with that. But what really happens is I just get grumpy. Halfway through the game, it feels like the game should have ended already. Or my opponent should have won already, or whatever. Or it feels like when you're designing an experience, its pace should quicken over time, right? So when you are playing through it, it gets quicker. Like, you, as a player learning how to play, understand the basic things more as you go along, and you're able to do the basic things quicker and all this kind of stuff. So your average experience of the game should speed up as you go along. Additionally, the game should help move you to a close instead of hold you at a middle. And a lot of these big games feel like they hold you at a middle. If you've seen some of my previous games, this is a lesson I learned in Spirits of Cardamansion, where it, in some scenarios, was almost impossible to end the game because it was very easy for the evil team to make the game run longer as a strategy. And so, learning from this mistake, in Spaceship Redoubt, I said, you get 6 turns, and that's it. And then the evil team wins, right? Which is funny because there might not be an evil team in Spaceship Redoubt. You can have a scenario where only good players were rolled into the game, which is hilarious. I've seen that happen a few times. They're like showcasing the game to people. They're playing game 2, and they're like, alright, I suspect this person is being evil all the time because of their behavior. They get into the game they're playing. Everyone doesn't trust everyone. Everyone's super suspicious all the time. And then the game ends and they all lose because they progressed none of their goals. They spent the entire time not trusting each other. It's very funny. But that's a climactic finish, right? Rather than another hour of, oh no, wait, actually we are on the good team. Okay, now we're just going to go through the motions of solving the game, doing our tasks, so to say. Because we're all on the same team, there's no opposition, there's no incentive to, there's no conflict. Conflict is in the not trusting each other, but as soon as you know you're all on the same team, there's no conflict anymore. And I think a lot of games don't do that very well, don't handle that progression to the end state very well. When you have a clock on something, the players see the end state coming and like, oh shit, you know, I need to act in a way that is informed by the end state coming. And I think that is something all games should have. It's something I praise Marvel Snap for, because Marvel Snap goes, okay, we've designed our game in this 6-turn space. I think 6 is the magic number a lot of the time. In this 6-turn space, we've costed our cards, most of the time, up to 6. 6 being these really powerful final turn things that are all, you know, super climactic or whatever. And then you, the player, putting them into your deck, has to figure out how best to use them in this space and time that you've got. And so some of the best cards allow you to get out the 6-powered things early, or discard the 6-powered things and use the big power that it has to, like, M-power, another thing. And yeah, these different strategies trying to use the space and time very effectively. And I think that is something that they've done very well. Whereas contrastingly, something like Magic the Gathering is like, you've got 43 turns, 53 turns before the game ends naturally, but there's stuff that you can do to prolong it. And then in that, you have to try and win, but also there's 100 different types of win conditions, and you could be attacking from all these different zones. And we have a whole color whose archetype is to slow down the game, and it's just like so difficult. But the difference is when you're playing something like Magic, and online is very different from in person, but playing Magic online, you're just counting enough inconveniences before you concede, basically. And board games designed with the same problem, it's really unlikely for you to just get up and walk away from the table. You're just going to sit there and just have the shits for the second hour of the game, like me. And so that's got to be really silly. Like, wouldn't it be better to make it so that your game has a really amazing 1 hour, like exactly 1 hour runtime, and it pushes up towards a climactic finish, and so you can kind of curate the experience a little bit. Like, imagine it's a film. You only get this many minutes. You have to choose stuff to cut so that it fits in this many minutes. Instead, people are like, oh yeah, let's play TI4. It's got a 4-hour minimum runtime. Like, get the fuck out of here. I'm not doing that. Alright. We've almost done the player tiles. We've got 2 more pages of player tiles. So basically what I did was, I go, here's one of every possible combination of the 3 tiles. So you've got one of each with the different type of location in each of the 3 different spaces. So one of each of the combination means there's 4 different combinations, and we get 2 lots of those. Everything else is a 2 of one type and 1 of the other types. You can see here we've got 2 stone, 1 forest, 2 stone, 1 prairie, and each of those has 1 type. And in the deck, all of those combinations exist 4 times. So for example, mountain, prairie exists 4 times, but mountain, X exists 8 times. No, more than that. Mountain, prairie exist once for each player, so 4 times in total. Yeah. And so in theory, there is enough for each player to have one of everything if it's a 4-player game. In a 2-player game, it's enough for each player to have 2 of everything. And this is kind of an abundance model rather than having less. In Catan, you have less because they go, this is exactly the fixed state. There is 2 or 3 of each type. But then they are narrowed by your access to them and where the other players have put their stuff or what the dice number is that shows up on it. Like, again, narrows it a second time. With this, I want to have 2 different parts of it. So the first part, on your turn, you start by placing a tile. And that every time adds potentially 3 resources. And then once you've placed a tile, you will get a series of actions that you can do. Amongst those actions, you can clear out a location for resources of that type, but only if that location has an adjacent matching one to it. So for example, this thing I'm cutting out now is 2 stone and a prairie. So if I place this, I can immediately be able to clear one of these stones to get that resource type. But once one of them is gone, it becomes, a different tile goes on top, it becomes cleared land, and then you no longer have 2 stone next to each other. So you have to place another tile next to them that overlaps with the stone to be able to mine a stone there, right? And so how you're placing your different tiles becomes very important in how you're able to get your resources. But also, you have to place them in such a way that not only that's happening, but you're constructing a line in which you can build a road, which happens after you've cleared resources, to make the path that the caravan is going to travel. So it has this kind of 2-step plan that you have to be mindful of both of the steps. And I think that that core piece is going to be what is very interesting about the game. I think a lot of things. I have a lot of opinions, just in general. But I think that stripping something down to the core mechanic for the first prototype allows you to get a strong analysis on what, or rather how, that core mechanic performs and how the players interact with it, some basic strategies that come out and stuff like that. How does the core gameplay loop feel? Do the players enjoy the theme that you thought was going to be interesting? Do the players, do you even give the players an opportunity to grapple with the theme? Like, is the theme something even present? Do you strip the theme out of it to see if they are more attracted to the theme or the mechanics or what? I've played games where all you really get of the theme is a pun, but then all of the gameplay mechanics are there. And then you get to see how the gameplay is intended to go at the final state. And then a lot of the stuff that you tend to catch in a stripped down version is like mathematical inconsistencies. People will be like, oh, if I go here, I get this many things. Or if this happens, I can do this to get this many things. And that like doesn't line up because of whatever, you know. And then you're able to fix the mathematical problems. Because sometimes in the design, mathematical distribution is the main thing that makes a difference in a player being lucky and having the standard experience and a player being unlucky and having a really shit experience. But you want to avoid. My problem is something like Settlers of Catan. If you don't know how important placing your shit is at the beginning, you have a bad time. I played a few games on the Catan online client, colonist.io. where I put my thing next to 3 trees and I was like, I'm going to have infinite wood. And that was great, but no one wanted to trade with me. So my infinite wood was just me turning 4 wood into something I could have just gotten naturally by having a settlement somewhere else. And so that was a really shit time. I just basically handicapped myself because I wanted to try something new that I thought would work. But because it's online client, I like have no assessment of what the play group is like and all this kind of stuff. Made it really bad. And stuff like this, as a designer, you can sometimes build to not have those problems, to like not exist as something that a player runs into. Like for example, my fix for Settlers of Catan is rather than the robber slowing down the game and taking things from people, the robber gives things to people, speeding up the game, building towards a particular climax. So what would happen is you would put the robber on a location and the robber would, instead of taking a card from someone's hand, you would choose, you choose where you place it, and the location that you put it on would give everyone a resource of that type, which almost always benefits you more than everyone else because you get exactly the thing that you need and you are able to then build immediately afterwards. So you have the advantage on rolling a 7 rather than you get to specifically hurt one other player at maybe an advantage on yourself, because sometimes the card that you get is useless. And I would much rather my players help each other and help themselves more than my players hurt each other and help themselves less. So I think uncooperative is better than competitive. And in this game, there is so far not that much player interaction at all. And that is something that I'm going to need to figure out where to put it in. Currently, the way that the tiles are distributed to the players is through like a picking from a communal pile kind of a thing. Like you would have a few revealed and you would grab one and that would be replaced. Like a pretty traditional shop in like a deck building game. And the only player interaction is like taking a thing that person might want. But then access to roads and stuff and clearings is infinite. I don't know if that's the best way to go. Later on, if ruined buildings are implemented, then the shop draft is really good all of a sudden, because when you're looking at the stuff in the shop, you go, oh, this is a ruined building of this type. If I take it, it will provide this bonus to me. That will be really good. But in picking it, I might not get the resources that I am needing. Because currently the game is really resource providing heavy. And if I'm taking something that cuts one of these tiles out, or it could be a ruined building and 2 clearings, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, shit, I have to figure out how I'm going to rebuild this thing if I'm missing a turn of being able to get a resource. And certain ones are more valuable than others. Like for example, Mountain Prairie is going to be better than Mountain Prairie Forest, because on the turn that you play Mountain Prairie, you can always get a resource from the mountain. Okay, number 3. All right, we are now 2 hours later worth of cutting. My hands are wrecked. Look at that. Look at that thumb bruising from the scissors. But excitedly, I get to show you a little bit about how it actually looks now. So let's around. You get to see what's going on my table. So First of all, this is the big pile of hex tiles. It did actually turn out quite nice. It's not very thick, but it's on a 200 GSM cardboard. No, 300 GSM cardboard. So it is pretty sturdy enough just for the prototype to be able to play the game and see how it goes. Then we've got our cleared tiles. So when you take the resources from a location, it would put this on top, and that's what it will become. And then we have the road tiles, which is basically just like a stone path. This is what the city ended up looking like, which is the same as the cleared path, but I've got a little stock art city on top of it. That's just for now, so people really know what it is. And then we have our kind of currency icon. Let me just grab one here. So for example, this is what you would get if you cut down a forest. You would get this tree token, and that's one bundle of tree goods. Flip back around for a second. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up just quickly what the board state might look like. So the first thing is you will have your own city that you start out with, and one set of 3, 1 tri-hex already. And then each turn, now I should be able to do this one-handed. There we go. So this is what this starting out looks like. It will always be wearing the tri-hex like a hat, and then that will dictate the direction that the city that you're delivering it to is in. Will always be 6 tiles away from this. And then as you're adding new tiles, you want to line these up so that they are adjacent. So for example, if we put this here, just plonk that on top, you could clear from either of the woods tiles, or you could clear on the prairie tiles, and that would give you a resource token, but you can't clear from the stone tiles because they are not adjacent. So say we clear from the woods, right? That goes on top. We get a tree resource, and then now this is a cleared thing. So next time, if we added another one, so let's just add a series of hats, right? It needs to go on top. There we go. So now we've got more trees, but the stone here lines up, so we could actually clear this, right? So we clear this, which gives us stone, which is this one. It's kind of just like ores and minerals, right? And then we can spend those things to put a road in, like this. So now we have a road starting, and that's kind of the idea. You're building out, and you're trying to use your actions efficiently, use your resources that you gather efficiently. Am I building roads? Am I going to be loading these things onto a caravan, getting it ready to deliver? And kind of racing the other people that you're playing against. This is just like I said, a really stripped down basic version of the game, because I wanted to test the pick up and deliver stuff. I wanted to test the actual resource mining and construction kind of things, because I haven't built a game like this before, and I wanted to be able to see how it would all come together and see how the different moving pieces work, because like moving 6 spaces to deliver something might be too short, it might be too long. The number of points needed to win might need to change, all this kind of stuff. I might need to add more. The game might feel empty and need more going on. So these are all things I'm going to be considering when we do a playtest, which is actually tomorrow. Tomorrow we've got Tabletop Tuesday, which is the Sydney local game designer meet up and game test thing. So that's why I bust my ass today to make sure that this was ready to go, because I wanted to bring it and have a look. And hopefully this was something cool for you to check out, so you can get an idea of just how much arts and crafts stuff I do in one day. Is a lot, unfortunately. And that's kind of it. If you want to see some more board game stuff on the channel, I will put some buttons up here for you to have a look at. And I have a lot of other board game content. I have a lot of Marvel Snap stuff. I've got a whole bunch of other things worth checking out on the channel, so I would appreciate if, just go have a look around. See if there's something for you. If you like this video, there's probably other stuff on there that will be interesting or helpful for you. And hit that subscribe button, because that'd be mighty cool of you also. And then hopefully I'll catch you later in a follow-up video, which will probably be maybe more about what the actual playtest looked like, all this kind of stuff. So hopefully I'll see you then.